Hi, I'm Diana Montford, the world's first, count me, first, transgender television journalist. I started this show in 1990, and yes, I was born male, but I'm all woman now. Anyway, my guest is transgender activist Tanya
Asapansa Johnson Walker.
Yes. Say that 3 times fast. And we're going to talk about all sorts of things. Tanya was recently in the New York Times. We'll talk to her about that. And she just completed an oral history for the Schomburg Center, which is for research in Black culture, as they call it. And that's wonderful. And Tanya is quite the accomplished person. She's an Army veteran in her previous life. When she was a male, or at least presented as a male, she was in the Army, and she is basically the scion of a prominent African family. And she's a fascinating person, and we're going to talk to her about everything. Tell us about the Schomburg Center. What is that all about?
Well, one day I was home. I got a phone call from Soello, someone who works at Sage in Harlem, Sage of Harlem. And he asked me would I like to come in, because he's working on a project called Living in My Living Room, an oral history project. And he thought that my story would be interesting. And so I...
Come over here.
And so I...
Come into the light.
And so I did it. And
you did it?
I was very glad to do it. It was slightly triggering or traumatizing to relive your history. However, I thought it was an excellent experience, and I would do it again.
Would you recommend it to others?
Yes, I would. Yes,
and this is the Schomburg Center. It is located in New York. It is under the auspices of the New York Public Library, and it is for research in Black culture.
Yes, and so it was a project done, Legend in My Living Room, oral history project was done for Black LGBT people in the community, and it was done so their history wouldn't be erased from history, and it was an excellent project. Thank you.
Can we hear some of the CD and see what that's like? I would imagine we can.
So we're on the record now. Thank you. So, what is your full name?
Tanya Asapansa Johnson Walker.
Tanya Asapansa Johnson Walker.
Yes.
That's an incredible name.
Yeah.
Where does it? Where does it originate? The name origin?
Well, I know my grandfather came from Freetown, Sierra Leone. So that's where it came from. Well, it came from him. But anyway, he was Ashanti African royalty. And I guess, they moved his family from Ghana to Nigeria, and then from Nigeria to Sierra Leone. He was in a British protectorate.
Wow.
When they broke up the empire. And my grandfather ended up in Sierra Leone, Freetown. And that's where he went to college, Foray Bay, and he went to, he learned to become a minister there.
Wow. And how do you spell the name? Can you spell it for us?
Sure. Asapansa, Johnson, Johnson.
Got it. So what year were you born?
I was born on May 5th, 1963.
1963. And where did you live when you were born?
Where did I live? I was born in Staten Island, New York.
Okay.
So we lived there for a few days. I lived there for a few days, and then they moved us, I think, or a few months, and then they moved us to Jersey.
To Jersey? What part of Jersey?
I think it was Elizabeth, New Jersey.
And how long were you there?
Probably a year or two.
A year or two?
And then we moved to South Plainfield, New Jersey.
Okay. And then from there?
From South Plainfield, New Jersey in 1976, we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. When I was like 13, 12, 13, 7th grade. And then I stayed there
Until when?
I stayed there until 1981. July 7th, 1981, I went into the United States Army.
And you were 17?
And I was sworn in at 17, but I went in at 18 after I finished high school.
And we saw some photographs, some black and white photographs. Excuse me. Who were those?
That was my grandfather.
Can we see those again, do you think?
With President Truman. He's presenting him with the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Award for his work on civil rights at that time in the 1940s. And it was done in Doris Brooks Square, Harlem, in front of 75,000 people who were fighting for civil rights. So my grandfather and President Truman worked on civil rights before Martin Luther King and before other civil rights leaders. My grandfather, as a result of his work in civil rights, had a street co-named after him in Staten Island, New York, on Van Duzer Street. Van Duzer is now Bishop Asapansa Johnson Way.
Isn't that great?
And I was really proud of my grandfather.
And I'm sure he would be very, very proud of you, because you're definitely a chip off the old block when it comes to courage, when it comes to all sorts of things. As we all know, Caitlyn Jenner, formerly known as Bruce Jenner, recently transitioned, and it has been in the news everywhere. She has been on magazine covers. She has her own television series, her own reality show, or so-called reality show. And I always wonder about reality shows. How real are they? But anyway, what do you think of Caitlyn Jenner?
Well, I'm grateful, for her success in coming out. I wish more trans women's coming out would be as perfect as hers. She got to grace the cover of magazines. She got a TV interview. She was already on a reality TV show with the Kardashians, and she has plenty of money. She's
I
successful.
happen to know that Caitlyn watches this show. Hi, Caitlyn.
She's successful, and she opened my father's eyes about trans folk, trans women, because my father didn't have a clue. And my father has gotten better with the gender pronouns when he speaks with me. Even
though you had transitioned in the 90s, he finally, because of Caitlyn Jenner, got with the program. Apparently, if a great athlete becomes a woman or lives her reality as a woman, suddenly everyone is validated, everyone is considered much more decent than before said athlete transitioned.
Yeah, I'm glad Caitlyn came out because of her status in society in the past and present. And maybe more people will Google transgender to find out who and what we are instead of remaining ignorant. I mean, being transgender is not a choice. It is what you're born. And gender is in your mind, in your brain, and it's not your genitals. So I am not my genitals. I am trans. I am a woman of trans experience.
Ditto, yes. And Caitlyn showed great courage at the age of 65 after a full and successful life as a man, coming out as a woman, and certainly a very lovely, appealing woman, I think. So that's wonderful. And she has goddess acceptance throughout the world, I mean, I think that's great.
I think she did. I think her coming out the way she did, I think it opened more people's eyes that, and I think more people will take us seriously as a result.
Yes.
Caitlyn, I think that, she was married like 3 times, I believe, and she has children, and I know she fought being trans all her life, or most of her life, and being trans won in the end, and I'm grateful for her.
Yes, so am I. So, Caitlyn, thank you so much for being you. We love you and we wish you the very best, and I'm sure you'll find your life much better now, as we have since we transitioned. I myself could never be a butch athlete. I was so Nelly. I was just it. So I almost wish I could have been some kind of big bruiser man. Ooh, but well, I did okay as Diana Montford, huh? Anyway, what would you say to young people who are fighting being trans, maybe because they come from a fundamentalist background? You know, so many people do and are afraid to be themselves because they're considered, you know, demonically possessed or other odd, you know, sort of. It's not, if you're from a very strict background, I'm sure it's very difficult. But luckily, both your parents and my parents were pretty sophisticated about these things. But what do you do if you're living in Muskogee or something, and you know your parent is the Baptist minister and he wants to do an exorcism or something?
Just, you know, realize you're not alone, and that there probably is a support group of people in your in your area or your town, your city, who will support you in your transition. And also, I would say if you have to, see a therapist, you know, both before and during your transition, and just get all the support you can, because it's not easy, and it's not really a decision. It's what you're born, and it's who you are, and you have just as much right to live on this planet Earth as anyone else, and you need to live your life freely and be who you are.
Yes.
Whether it's trans man or trans woman.
It's also a good idea if you're trans to go to a city, you know, a major city, wherever you're watching this. We're live streamed all over the world, so wherever you're watching this, if you can go to a city, that makes it much easier, you know, not only to transition, but to find employment, but to do all sorts of things. It really, if you can possibly get to a big city, go, because it will make your life much easier, won't it?
Yes, employment and education is mainly what trans folks need.
Yes.
In this society today, and also to not be discriminated against and have both human and civil rights in society.
Which can be difficult if you are something that most people despise. And now we're back to Caitlyn. Caitlyn really has validated all of us, because if an ideal man becomes a woman, then obviously anyone can, you know.
That's what they believe, but you know, you're either trans or you're not. And some people I know some people have reverted back to the other gender who weren't trans, or, you know, and they weren't sure they were trans. If you're trans, you know you're trans. Mm-hmm. You know from a small child that you're different, you're unique. Because when I was a child, and I was in elementary school, and we played kickball, the boys said I was a girl, go play with the girls on the kickball team. And when I got over to the girls' side, they said, no, you're a boy, go back to the boys' side. So I was stuck in the middle, and I knew I was different and special then.
Were you embarrassed by that?
I was ashamed. I didn't understand. I didn't understand why I wasn't accepted by the boys or the girls. You know, where did I fit in? I was like a misfit. Did
your teachers accept you?
No, they paid it no attention. They were not supportive. They weren't, you know.
How about your family?
Oh, my family, they weren't supportive at all. They didn't support me. You know, they didn't know I was trans then. They just thought that maybe I was going to grow up to be gay. Mm-hmm. And when I grew up, you know, I finished high school and I went into the military. And because I fought being trans for so long. And when I came out of the military, I
Is that why you went into the military? Because you were fighting it?
yes, I was fighting being who I was, which was a trans woman. And I went in and I came out and I transitioned in the 90s. I got out of the military in 1981 and I transitioned in 1990, so that was 10 years. That was almost 10 years after I got out of the military. I was in the combat engineers. I had we work with explosives and things like that, and bridges, and we built, bridges so to get the troops across, rivers. And I spent some time in Germany.
You speak German, don't you?
Sprechen Sie kleine Deutsch. Und du weißt das ja.
Which means?
I speak a little German, and you know that. Und du, do you?
No te hablo español.
So, and the military was a great experience for me. And I would.
Why was it a great experience, even though you were trans?
It was. You get it. I got the chance to travel, and to leave the country, and to experience, other cultures, and as a young person,
when you could still adapt yourself to new and other cultures and learn and grow.
Yes, and Germany was very special, a very special place, because I visited Dachau, which was a concentration camp while I was there, and it was. I can't explain to you what I smelled and saw when I went into the where the ovens were.
It was still smells?
It still has. You could still smell things that I won't say, but I just won't say. It's horrible, and I did get that experience while I was there, and it did happen. And for those who say that they didn't kill Jewish people, they did kill Jewish people in those. And
they also killed progressive politicians.
They killed some blacks. They killed, any undesirables.
Certainly gay people.
And they killed gay people also.
Yes.
And it did happen.
I come from a family of progressive politicians in Spain. Excuse me, and they killed my two grandaunts, who are two harmless spinsters, simply because their brother, my grandfather, was known as the father of the poor and was one of the founders of the Spanish Republic. And the Nazis did not like the Spanish Republic. They didn't like anything or anyone. But, now, the oral history that you did for the Schomburg Center, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, when someone hears these things, what will that person glean from your oral history? Will that person say, my God, the people of the 20th and 21st century had a terrible time? Or will they say, how brave these people were, these nonconformists? Or will they say both?
They'll probably say that they were brave to live in a society without civil and human rights, and survive. And they'll say that we were resilient to society. We were resilient to survive under hate and different things like that. Because a lot of trans women, I think it was like already this year, I forgot how many it was. I don't know if it was 11 trans women that were killed, and I think most of them were black trans women that were killed this year already as a result of hate crimes. And, some of them were shot and killed and just bludgeoned by people who hate trans folk. So I would say when a trans person is killed due to violence, I would like to see the whole LGBT community come out against this type of hatred and this type of violence, instead of just the trans community supporting that person.
Do you find that gay men feel less respectful of transgender women, they seem to like transgender men. But do you think that gay men and even lesbians dislike transgender people?
Well, I don't think they understand us, because I've heard comments like, we just changed our bodies because we couldn't handle being gay or whatever, or, I've heard things like that. But that's from people who are ignorant. But there are some in the community who are trying to understand trans women and trans men better.
Yes, there are.
And I'm on the board of Audre Lorde Project,
Which is a lesbian organization.
which is a lesbian organization. However, they respect gender pronouns in their space, and they also have a trans justice program here in New York City. And
what is that? A trans justice program?
the trans justice program is a program so that trans people will know their rights. Trans people will be able to learn how to advocate for themselves and fight against oppression and fight for their own liberation in society.
But then they say we're, being troublemakers and not towing the line. Gay men especially, when trans people, especially trans women, fight for their rights, say, oh, see, we can't take these people anywhere. Look, see this?
Well, trans people are forced into having to fight for their own rights because we're unique. They think that they think that we're gay. A lot of us are, just gay people, that couldn't handle it, and we're not.
I know some trans women who are lesbians.
Right.
And I know some trans men who are gay men. So it's not, people don't transition just because they're gay and want to blend in. Because sometimes they are, not doing it the normal, quote in quotes, way when they transition. They're becoming, gay once they've transitioned. So I know a trans woman, you may know her yourselves, you see her on the show. Her name is John Principali. She is a trans woman. She is a lesbian. And many years ago, in 1970, when she was 16, she went to a psychiatrist at her parents' urging. And the psychiatrist said, well, my dear, you like women. Therefore, you cannot be transgendered. You just like pretty clothes. So buy yourself a frilly shirt and let it go at that. Well, she tried it for a while, and she got married, and she had children. But ultimately, a frilly shirt wasn't enough. A little chapstick didn't quite do it. So she transitioned, and she's very happy now and very happily involved in a lesbian marriage. And, there is no such thing as normal. Normal is, no one is normal. As soon as you get to know someone, you see how abnormal each person is. Trans, non-trans, whatever. Everybody's insane, and we all know this.
I myself am a heterosexual trans woman. However, Caitlyn is, I believe, a lesbian.
Well, she might turn out to be bi.
I don't know. She could turn out to be bi, but she said she never slept with a man. So I think in one interview, so I'm not, saying what her sexuality is or whatever. However, I believe, I think that'll come out in one of the reality shows or
well,
whatever.
I've tried both, and let me tell you, each person is a world unto herself or himself, We're all a little bit bi, so why not try everything?
Yeah, and then Caitlyn, getting back at Caitlyn again, I just hope that Caitlyn uses her position, her new position in society, to help fight for transgender rights in education, employment, and accommodations, and for human and civil rights of trans folk in the world today.
Mm-hmm. But just the fact that Caitlyn has transitioned and been so public about it certainly has overcome considerable prejudice, I think. So just by existing, Caitlyn Jenner has smoothed the way to a degree that wasn't there just before she transitioned. It's an interesting situation. Just before she transitioned, it was business as usual and people despised trans folk. Now, even if they don't feel quite comfortable with trans folk, they at least give us the benefit of the doubt and they are at least thinking about this. Who are these people really? So anyway, by the way, before I forget, our wonderful director, Malik Parker. I always forget, and I do not wish to forget. So, young people see you and they think, oh, I want to be her. Many years ago, I saw Candy Darling, a Warhol superstar transgender lady, on a television show, and I thought, yes, I see the person I wish to be. So now they see you and they want to be you. It's a long road to being you, isn't it?
It's a long road, and you really have to, because I didn't have any support, too much support coming out. I mean, I hung around people who were trans, and we were homeless, living in abandoned buildings.
Oh my God, really?
In Staten Island and other parts of the city. And basically, we had to eat at restaurants. We had to go to restaurants and eat when they were throwing out the food, and that's how we ate. And we took a shower in the ferry terminal, in a sink, not a shower, but in the sink at the ferry terminal. Or we took a shower at a gym, and once we were chased out of the men's room because we thought that we had to use the men's room because we didn't have an identity like trans now. Coming out as trans is much easier today than it was when I came out in the 90s.
And on that note, I'm Diana Montford. This has been the Diana Montford Show. My guest has been Ms. Tanya, you'd better say your name.
Tanya Asapansa Johnson Walker.
Okay, it's the Asapansa that throws me. Anyway, transgender activist, and I'm Diana Montford. This has been the Diana Montford Show. Even if no one else loves you, you know I love you. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you next time. And if you're trans, try to live your reality. Try to find a way to be trans. I know sometimes it's not easy if you have other commitments, if you're married, if you have children, whether you're a trans man or a trans woman, if you possibly can, find yourself and live your own reality, do so. Love you a lot. See you next time. Bye.
Wow.